Hey folks, Pat here. Welcome back. Talking Trains today, episode number 3, I guess. We are going to run a coal mine train. I have not been up to the coal mine in a little while, so let's go ahead and get to it. So don't forget my headlight. And so today we have got 5 empties and 10 beam cars here. We're going to head on down to the smelter and we are going to grab a couple rail cars and head all the way up to the coal mine, which probably take about half an hour, I think. So as soon as we get going here, I'm going to turn on my lights though. All of the lights, there we go. And so this should be pretty straightforward as far as a run goes, but at the same point in time it will take a little bit of time to get up there, so I figured today would be a good day to actually talk about the historical Midland a little bit, in case you're not familiar. Because, hang on, let me check my fire here. Oh yeah, okay. We're good. Off we go. Well, not that way. Oh, I should probably turn that on too. Let's try this again. Let's see. Yep. Oh, let me check and see. All these things I should do before I hit the throttle here and turn off my handbrakes. Untie my handbrakes. That looks good. Check the switches. Those are good. Let's go ahead and close this up here. Alright. Everything looks pretty good. Everybody coming with? Everybody's coming with. Alright, off we go. But the historical Midland, so the Midlands always appealed to me in some respects because I grew up pretty close to it. So it originated in Colorado City, which is Colorado Springs today. Well, Colorado City is still there, but Colorado City basically grew into Colorado Springs, which, if you're not familiar, is halfway between Denver and Pueblo. So south of Denver, north of Pueblo, Colorado. And it was started in the mid-1880s, basically as an alternative to the Rio Grande, which started in Denver probably like a decade before. I'm not near as up to speed on the history of the Denver Rio Grande as I am the Midland, because Midland was the last railroad that I modeled, and so I spent a lot of time kind of diving into it, its past, things like that. And unlike the Rio Grande, it was a standard gauge railroad, and so unlike this game where everything is narrow gauge, I've tried to build the Midland to roughly standard gauge standards here. But it faced a lot of challenges in terms of getting started and stuff, because the Rio Grande, Denver and Rio Grande, had basically snagged some of the best routes in the state right off the bat. Now, the Rio Grande originally started with the whole plan that it was going to run south. Why am I running on a conveyor belt? It's an idiot. I want to go back here and tie down my crummy here, because we got a 2% downgrade coming up here. Anyway, and so it was originally just going to go south, but then Leadville became really big, and so Leadville was the biggest city in Colorado for a little bit of time there. Denver was just a cow town for the longest time, and there we go. So we want to keep this slack all spooled out like that and just drag this train down the hill here. But coming up from the south, there was a major competitor to the Rio Grande. That was the Santa Fe. And so some of you are probably familiar with the Santa Fe Rio Grande, the Royal Gorge War, stuff like that. And so the Rio Grande won that one, and the Santa Fe got the rights over Raton to the south, effectively blocking off any growth of the Rio Grande south. But in narrow gauge, getting it up to Leadville was, it was kind of long. So going from Denver is Denver down to Pueblo, and then up through the Royal Gorge, through Salida, and then up to Leadville. And so that left the door open for another railroad to try and actually poke through Ute Pass, which runs west out of Colorado Springs. And of course, you know, someone decided to do that, and that was the Midland. And they decided to get super, like, gutsy about it and said, well, not only is it shorter, but let's make it standard gauge. So we can run heavier trains and get, you know, stronger motive power. Now that came at the expense of actually having to go up and over a pass, and that's well, there were 3 passes on the Midland, 3 summits eventually, but the first one over Trot Creek Pass, which is just a bit east of Buena Vista nowadays, was really steep. And U Pass was really steep and curvy. And if you've ever driven US 24 out of west out of Colorado Springs, you can still see some of the grade and some of the tunnels up there. They had to blast like 8 tunnels within the first like 30 miles of rail. And so it was a really pretty railroad, but it wasn't very practical. But they did build it. So starting in the early 1880s, like 1883 or so, and I think most of it was done by 1887. And they planned the whole thing out so that it would go all the way from Colorado City, where it would interface with the Rock Island and the Santa Fe, or interchange with both of those routes, and then head all the way to the Western Slope. And they built it. So it was pretty successful its first couple of years. So just because it was an alternative to the Rio Grande, and the Rio Grande was kind of on tougher times, even though it had a lot more economic resources underneath it. But, you know, I mean, there were a couple things that were bad about it. So it was it was really steep. It was really curvy. It wound up that they could not run the heavy trains that they wanted to, much like many of you in Railroads Online probably appreciate now. So, and it became a pain to maintain. Particularly the parts that ran west of Leadville. That switch down there is not lined for my movement. We will go grab it here. Let's just leave a little bit of brake on here, and then we'll go hop down there and get it. So, but the part west of Leadville was particularly spectacular. And if any of you do any 4x4 in Colorado, you know about Hagerman Pass. Hagerman's the guy who built the Midland, and the pass is, of course, named after him. And it runs west out of Leadville up around Turquoise, which is a big reservoir there. Well, of course, the reservoir wasn't there when the railroad was there, but the grade goes underneath the reservoir. And then, well, actually, I think it goes kind of along the side. There's a chunk where the road actually follows that. And then, it's going a little slow here. We'll walk and we'll mosey on up there and catch our train. So... but then it hits Hagerman Pass, which was the highest railroad pass, standard gauge. I think there's a narrow gauge one that's even higher, but somebody can correct me on that one. But highest standard gauge pass in Colorado for the longest time. It was over 11,000 feet. It was way up there. And if if you're into 4x4, and you can take a Jeep up there nowadays. Let's go kick off that caboose brake here. And there's a tunnel way up there. There's like I think it's a half-mile tunnel, Hagerman Tunnel. It's still up at the top there. It's partially collapsed. It's got a full, it's got a glacier that lives in it all year now. But absolutely spectacular views, and these monster trestles. And so people in this game complain about sky bridges, but sky bridges were actually a thing. There's a couple of them. And the Midland built a couple really, really spindly, crazy-looking things in order to get up and over Hagerman Pass. And so the western part of the railroad, and of course you can imagine that thing was basically closed from November to April, May. So they had an army of guys out there with snow shovels all the time trying to actually keep the line open. It was challenging. The Midland did have a couple rotaries that they usually borrow from other railroads like the Santa Fe. Although I think they may have had 1 or 2 that were actually their own motive power, or actually on their own roster. Is that switch lined? I hope it is. It is. So, but the 1880s were challenging. 1890s were pretty challenging. But Leadville was booming at the time, and so anybody who had access to Leadville, you kind of made money. And so even just by accident, in some respects, just because it was the economic center of the state for quite a while. The Midland also had another advantage over the Rio Grande. Not just standard gauge, but it had direct access to Cripple Creek, which did start to boom about the same time. And Cripple Creek, unlike a lot of the other mining towns in Colorado, never really went away. It's gone through its ups and downs, but they've always been able to pull gold out of Cripple Creek. And so the Midland, since it went up and over Ute Pass, let's see, how many of these do I want to take? I've got 10. Oh, God, I didn't even do the math on this one. So let's see. Well, all right, let's do the math. So, 5 of these, all right, and so these hold 10. And to produce one car of this on normal settings, it's, I think, 2 of these and 1 rail. So, oh my gosh, we're going to have way more coal than we have anything. I don't even need to do the math. Let's go ahead and grab all the rails. I think we can schlep all these all the way up there. So, let's go ahead and pull this pin. Tie you down. Tie you down. And let's just bring all 30 rails up there. There's no reason not to. Untie you. Are you tied? You're tied. Untie you. Yeah. This'll work. Oh, yeah, it's too early for math. Let's see. Nice and gentle. So I came in here and extended this track, so there's kind of like a double Y here, but that's just so I can park the cordwood train in there. Oh, can't see my corner here, but we're just gonna guess. That'll probably do. Brake set. Are we past the switch? We better be past the switch. We're past the switch. Oh, just barely. Ooh. Ooh. Oh, we're not. Dang it. I'm getting lazy on my railroading here today. So going between equipment, shouldn't be doing that, but whatever. Half car. Yeah, that's probably good. Let's go see. Ooh, this is tight in here. So that's alright. Perfect. Change you. Oh, check, make sure I pulled my, got my link? Got my link. We're good. That would have pissed me off. If I didn't have the link. And butted knuckles there. Although, yeah, you don't really have knuckles, but I guess it's kind of the same. Oh, really? Didn't know this door opened. Guess you learn something new every day. Close that up. We just need to go in there and kiss that car a little bit. We are on a little downgrade here, so we'll bleed off all that speed that I just built up and just take it nice and easy. There we go. That's perfect. Oh, that's maybe a little easy, but whatever. Yeah, so we'll run up to the coal mine here. This is going to be... this train's definitely going to be a money maker now that I think about it, just because of how much you get out of so little input. Even on... I think I've got mine on hard. I think it's... Yeah, it's called hard setting, and it's realistic. Yeah, it's hard settings and realistic... Hard economy and realistic physics. There we go. Which has been taking some getting used to, but we have made a lot of money in a very short amount of time, so I am happy about that, to say the least. Alright, so you want to make sure those 3 cars are coming with us, which Caboose is going to block my view here pretty soon. Yep, looks like they're good. That's a little too fast. You can leave that all off. Just need to get past the switch. So that is tight right there. So I am kind of out of room though, right up against the canyon wall right there. Let's see. But yeah, I had to come in here and redo the track just a little bit so I could fit the cordwood train over here. The only thing that I'm not happy about with the arrangement down here, other than maybe this tight corner, it's actually not that bad, is I cannot fit a double crossover in here. It's just not going to work. Geez, man, that's close too, but I think we're good. Yeah, we're good on this one. Do I get a pin? See, I got a pin, but no link. And so what that means is the cordwood train, in order to get it to park here on the Y, I actually have to have this track clear. Which isn't a problem. It just means in the schedule that after I run this train here, we'll bring it back down from the coal mine and we'll park it here, then run the cordwood train while this track here is clear. It'll be a little bit of a... Well, actually no, I'll have to run this train all the way up to the yard before this track is clear. Come to think of it, because we'll have to haul out the steel. Yeah, it'll work though. It's just the way that the schedule is going to have to be until I decide to do something else down here. But I have redone the trackage down here a lot, and so I do not want to do it like a 5th time. Maybe I will after, you know, I've done a little bit more building down south. But building is one of those things. It's a lot of fun, but you can only do so much of it before you're kind of like, nah, I want to run trains. And I'm kind of at that point right now. So here we go. Back we go. So we got a little bit more weight now, so we can actually just get her rolling here. That should do. Not smash these cars too hard here, because I bet you these rail cars are heavy. In fact, let's check that. What's my weight? 20,000 pounds? Yeah, those are pretty heavy. And I think these cars here are only 10. What are they? They are 9,300 pounds. So yeah. So we got the weight on the head end. That's good. Well, except for those empty hoppers, but that's okay. Smash! He just knocked over the conductor's coffee, but that's his problem. So. Okay, so that's everybody. And my caboose brake is kicked off. So let's head up here. Off we go. Up. Let's go the right way. I keep forgetting about that. Let's try this again. Caboose is moving? Caboose is moving. Alright, coffee time. Oh, that's tight. That's not... yeah, it's doable. It's workable. We'll just leave it. So we got a little climb ahead of us, so let's go ahead and make sure that... Oh, there's a switch up here that's probably not lined for my movement, unfortunately. Let's go take a look. It is not. Let's see if I can run up there and grab it. Oh, I hope I can. Yeah, I think we'll be okay. Yeah. Oh, it's gonna be close. Whoop. We got it. Alright, now we do need to open up here. Let's do about 65. Check our flyer. Pew, 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 pew. Throwing some sticks. Yeah, this is a pretty beefy train now. So let's see, we got 10 and 5, that's 15, and 3, 18, 19 with crummy. So this might be a little bit of a challenge, up with 2% grade here. I guess we really want to take a look at the weight more so than anything else. Oh yeah, we're slowing down already. This might be a little bit of a climb here. Oh yeah, maybe then some, but sounds like we'll be okay. We'll just go up here and see. So, but yeah, like the historical Midland, or I guess like my Midland, the historical one had some pretty gnarly grades on it. So not as gnarly as some of y'all's railroads out there, railroads online, and I love you for it. But at the same point in time, you know, that definitely limits your operation. The same thing was true with Midland. In fact, going up Hagerman Pass, it was common and routine to have not just mid-train but end-of-train helpers as well. So the line ran down from Hagerman Pass going west down through Rudy, which is now underwater, in Rudy Reservoir, and popped out near Basalt, where they had a large engine facility that was basically all helpers, and so they had some very heavy motive power there for years that would help loads up the west side of the pass, and then of course Leadville on the east side of the pass had a bunch of helpers too. And so it just wasn't a really good setup for a railroad that was designed to be a transcontinental link. That was the whole idea. It was supposed to be like shorter than the Rio Grande and heavier, meaning that, you know, they used standard gauge. But eventually the Rio Grande was like, oh, well, we can get standard gauge up through the Royal Gorge, no problem. So they had a 3-rail there for a little while, and so they started running standard gauge trains there. And then eventually they kind of abandoned Marshall Pass, which went west out of Salida. I mean, they didn't abandon it. They just didn't use it as much once they finished Tennessee Pass, which is kind of the natural way to get out of Leadville. The Midland didn't have rights to that, and so that's why they went up and over Hagerman. Actually, we're going to do just fine here. So, we're going to do just fine here. There's a little steep part up here, so let's actually keep the speed on while we can. But no problems at all. Crummy's still coming with. So let's take a look at this beast here. There you go. And of course now we're slowing down. Oops, sorry, my bad. But actually that's a pretty good shot right there. I like that one. Oh yeah, tough. So there's definitely a piece in there that's you can see the knuckle, you know, the train, or the kind of the hard parts right where the steel cars are right about now. We got to come in here and relay this, otherwise we might actually stall this train. In fact, we are going to stall this train if we don't actually. We got to throw down some grit here too. We're not getting any wheel slip though, so that's when you use the grit. But just in case. Oof, oof. I'm sorry, number 5. I wasn't paying attention. But yeah, you can see there's a buckle in the bridge right there. We're going to have to come in here and sort that out. So, because this train, I'd like to run it basically at this tonnage right here. If not, maybe a little bit more. I'd actually like to throw a couple more beam cars on there. Well, we could balance that out a little bit. So maybe a couple more beam cars and maybe a couple less rail cars, because 10 rail cars, 10 rails on a car, a single rail car is going to go pretty far in terms of producing coal. That would produce, a single rail car would produce 5 cars of coal on hard settings, if I'm not mistaken. But oof, that was a little tight. So let's go ahead and kick the sander off here. We should be okay now. Yeah, picking back up speed here, because I think the rest of this is 2%. And then up to the coal mine, it's not near as steep. But that was actually pretty close. We almost stalled out there. Alright, here we go. So, but anyway, by the 1890s, the Midland and the Silver Bust basically busted all of your Colorado railroads, and the Midland was kind of a canary in the coal mine at that point in time. So its exposure in Silverton, or not in Silverton, that was Rio Grande, but its exposure to Leadville's business basically collapsed. It went into bankruptcy a couple times. It was jointly owned by both the Rio Grande and the Santa Fe, who basically wanted to get their hands on it just so that the other one didn't. At least exclusively have their control of it. And then they had problems with the western part, because the Midland only built tracks down to Glenwood. And then the portion that went from Glenwood to Grand Junction was jointly owned by the Midland and the Rio Grande. The Rio Grande Western. And if you know the history behind that, the Rio Grande and the Rio Grande, Denver Rio Grande Western were actually 2 different railroads. They were the results of, I don't know, basically what you would call a railroad divorce. You know, a spat between owners, so to speak. And at first the Rio Grande Western which is the part that went up to Utah, was actually... Oh, man, did I stall? I kicked off the thing there so that I wouldn't actually... And look at that. We got the wheel slip going on. We gotta... I don't know if we're gonna be able to do this. I didn't even think about that. Come on. Brake, 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 brake. Brake, 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 brake. Oh, it's pulling us down the hill. Stop that. Lame. It's a poor train handling on your part here, Pat. Because you are not paying attention. Are we stopped? We are stopped. Okay, so here we go. Let's go ahead and kick off our locomotive brake, which is not going to work. We're going to have to completely stop this train. Otherwise, we're going to have to double it, which sucks. Let's see. So when you stall a train like this, if I remember, you want to actually have your locomotive brake off, juice it until the drivers start pulling, and then we start pulling off handbrakes until it moves. So, and hopefully it moves in the direction we want it to move in. Let's pull this one off. Looks like it's trying. Oh. How many of these brakes did I set? That one's off. That one's off. Did I set this one? Pull that one off. Okay, it's trying to move in the direction. The only brake that's left is the tender. So, pull that one off. There we go. God, it's blowing all the schedules today. But anyway, I'm glad you got to see that. So, to tell you the truth, we could have thrown down some sand there, but again, if you're not actually moving, sand doesn't do any good because all it just does is pile up in front of the wheel. You'll see that on the prototype railroad, even modern day. Every now and then, you'll just see this spot where there's this absolute pile of sand, and that's where an engineer got stuck. So, it's like hit the yellow button, and it's like it's not doing anything. So, but anyway, all right, we got about a 3%, or no, I think this is 1.5 for a ways. There are some curvy, janky parts up in here, but I haven't been up on this route in probably a week. And so I'm kind of curious as well how well this train handles it. But we're definitely going to have to go in there and actually do some adjustments. The same thing, I don't like that switch being there now. Yeah, because this is technically westbound. Any westbound train would have a hell of a time getting up and over that switch if it has to stop. Short of it, I don't know. I might have to do some things. But this S curve here, I'm not happy with it. It's not technically an S curve because there are tangent sections between portions of it. But I did this just to maintain the grade. But I think I'd rather sacrifice a 0.5% of grade to actually just straighten this piece out. And so we're going to put a work order in for that too. But that's okay. Anyway, so like back to the Midland, the actual Midland. So 1890s were tough. So Hagerman lost control of the railroad. It went back to control to some eastern guys, and then to the Santa Fe, and then jointly with the Rio Grande, and then, you know, the Silver Bust. It was basically hot potato for everybody. There was a couple points in time where it closed because they had built they'd spent a lot of money to actually build an even longer tunnel underneath Hagerman Pass called the Ivanhoe Tunnel, which is still there. But they finally finished it. The only way they could finish it was by selling the tunnel, and then the tunnel company turned around and charged like tolls to the railroad. And there was a point in time where they were like, no, we don't want to pay your fees anymore. And so the people who owned the tunnel were like, fine, you can't use our tunnel. And so they had to reopen Hagerman Pass with all of its problems, and re-maintain it and all kinds of different stuff. And it was not a good time for the railroad. And I might have the dates screwed up on that and things like that, but Needless to say, it was difficult to maintain any kind of profitability on the railroad, but it was profitable enough to actually keep going because there were a few pieces of it that were pretty profitable. And one of them was the way western part, where they had all these interests in these coal mines that were now feeding the big steel mill in Pueblo, which kept growing, particularly in terms of coke. And then the other part was the eastern piece of the railroad, which was Cripple Creek, which was almost always profitable for the railroad, so for the Midland. And so it kind of tootled along for a little while, through the early 1900s. In the late 1900s, the Rio Grande and the Santa Fe kind of got tired of messing with it, so they kind of let it go. And a local guy bought it right before World War I, and he started putting a lot of money into it, and it was actually looking pretty good. And then World War I hits, and then basically like the precursor to the surface train, the STB, I think it was called the Railroad War or something. Anyway, the Railroad Board took over all American railroads to coordinate the war effort, and they decided at that point in time that the Midland, with fully standard gauge track and stuff like that, would be a good corridor, and so they actually flooded it with traffic and broke it in the process. So they put way too many cars on it, burned out all the motive power, ripped up the track, something terrible, and within, I think it was like 6 months or a year of the railroad board directing all this traffic, they immediately took it all away because it was just clogged. It was absolutely jammed, and they could not keep up with the traffic and things like that. And they weren't necessarily routing it over the Rio Grande. What they wound up doing was actually routing most of it on the overland route, the Union Pacific, which could handle all the traffic that you could basically throw at it. But they're trying to spread things out, and everybody has buddies in Washington and whatnot. That's a pretty picture right there. I like that one too. Let's do that one. Because I haven't been up here in the coal mine in a little while. And so, like by 1920, it was basically throttled. The entire thing was strangled, because during World War I, the railroad board decided who ran what, and they basically murdered the Midland at that point in time. There was like a brief period at the end of it where the Santa Fe was going to buy it again. They did an inspection in like 1922 or something like that, and it was cut. The Santa Fe took one look at it and said, "No, it'll take millions of dollars to bring this thing back up to code," and so screw that. We're not going to do that. And they decided at that point in time to scrap it, and so they scrapped everything west of Divide. So everything west of Divide, including everything up and over Hagerman, or at least what was left of it. They pulled the rails out of the Busk Ivanhoe, or now it was called the Carlton Tunnel, and turned it into a highway tunnel, turned it over to the Colorado Highway Authority. There were a couple parts that were immediately turned into highways, so like the route from Basalt down to Aspen is today still on the Midland grade at that point in time. And there was a couple other spots they took over, like near Trout Creek Pass, and I think a chunk of the road that goes US 50, or no, it's not 50, but the route that goes north out of Salida up into Basalt, a chunk of that is actually built on the Midland, up near the Leadville area. And then, see, this is just the weight slowing us down here. See how we're taut right here? And so it's just the weight of this train is actually literally acting as a braking force because we're on level track right here. I think we could start going down grade, maybe up where my crosshairs are, right there, a little bit. And so I think rather than just run up there and tie down the caboose brake, though, we'll just coast. Okay. We'll use the weight of the engine to kind of outrun the rest of the train and keep it nice and tight. So, but there was a piece in Midland that survived, and that was the Midland Terminal, which was broken off basically a little bit before bankruptcy. And that was a chunk that ran between Colorado City and Cripple Creek, and that actually stayed in operation until well after World War II. because Cripple Creek, like I said, has always produced gold. Now the town itself, not so much. And I remember growing up, way before they even did legalized gambling in Cripple Creek, it was a pretty shady place to go. So now it's kind of glitzy. Not as much as like Blackhawk or Central City, but at the same point in time, it's kind of changed in terms of its demeanor. All right, now we are going downhill, so let's peel off the speed. We're not in buff yet, though. So that slack probably will start to run in here. I'm kind of curious when it does. There it goes. No, we're still outrunning it. See how it's kind of coming in and out, drifting in and out right there? That's because there's a little downgrade right here, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, it ends after this curve here. Or maybe it's the next curve here. So we're just going to coast. Drift. So... but that piece of the Midland Terminal was actually fairly successful for quite a while. But eventually it was, even that dried up and, it was gone. So at that point in time. And by that point in time, the Rio Grande had built the Moffett Route, which basically solved most of their problems in terms of getting trains up and over Tennessee Pass. That route gradually fell out of use over the next, 20, 30 years. I remember as a kid camping along the Arkansas, you could still see occasional trains that would go up and over Tennessee Pass, but most of them were absolutely going to be routed up and through the Moffett Route, which you can take on Amtrak to this day with the California Zephyr. That's actually a pretty busy route right now. Or at least so is my understanding. So, I used to have some UP contacts who worked in Denver, and there was a while where they were kind of worried about their jobs. And then after a little bit, they were like, no, actually, we're busy again. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So eventually the Denver Rio Grande took over the Southern Pacific, even though it decided to retain the Southern Pacific name and logo. And then that was taken over by the Union Pacific, and then of course they shut down Tennessee Pass because they were like, no, we do not need this. And despite many, many efforts to try and get that one up and going again, it is basically, I'm going to tell you right now, the UP will never, ever let that thing go. And they've scrapped most of, I think the rails are still there, but the signals are all tore out, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a few years since I've been up to Leadville. But they were definitely in the process of doing that. Maybe like a decade ago. Maybe less, I don't remember. So anyway, we got about 1.5% to 2% going up here, so let's go ahead and build up some speed here, since we got nice straight and not too curvy rail, just to get some momentum going. And this is the home stretch. Coal mine's right up there. We are almost home. Not going to quite make it in half an hour here, thanks to stalls. But as long as we can avoid one more of those, we'll be in really good shape. Let's go ahead and hop out of the cab here, check out the pretty scenery. So I do miss the snow, but the not snow is pretty cool too. I guess they call this spring. It'll be interesting. Like I said, it'd be really cool if we get fall someday. If we had some deciduous trees. Right now, fall would basically look like this, I think. So, losing a little bit of speed here. Let's open that back up. Let's check our fire while we're at it. But some of that's just going to be a function of speed too, which should naturally be slower. Sticks. All right. Yeah, we're not doing too bad. So, but now I got interested in the Midland, like I said, because I grew up in the area and spent a lot of time up in Ute Pass and all the part of South Park where the Midland ran through Hartselle and things like that, 11 Mile Canyon. And just as a kid, I kind of noticed, so I was like, well, there's tunnels over here. Was there a railroad over here? And so, back in the day, it was really hard to find information on that. You could go to, the Pioneers Museum in Colorado Springs, and you could find out a little bit about it. Of course, and then in Manitou, or in Old Colorado City, the roundhouse was there, and still is, because when they built the Midland originally, they kind of built it to last. And so the roundhouse itself was built out of stone. It was an art gallery for many, many years, and now it's a brewery, which I have yet to visit. But I hear good things about. So, and then, yeah, we're just going to go slow and steady here. I think we're going to be okay. It's just going to take us a little bit of time because it's pretty consistent grade all the way up. But then when I got a little bit older, and definitely when I was in college, had access to more things, more local archives and things like that, I started to look into it, and it's pretty cool. There's actually a couple books that have been written on it. One of them was by a local. It's out of print now, but it basically walks you through the entire history in great detail. Actually has diagrams and listings of all the rolling stocks. I've got some timetables from the original Midland that I just managed to find on eBay every now and then. And there's pieces of china that you can still get, because of course the old china rule, you used to huck it out of the, what was it, the south side of the of the dining car if you had a broken piece. So find little bits of china here and there, and sometimes whole pieces. There are a few of those that are still out there. And then the same thing's true with like some of the other materials that would exist, like advertising and what do they call them? It's like waybills or something like that. Little flyers they used to pass out that would have ticket prices on them. There's a name for those that I'm forgetting. I don't think it's waybills. I'm just going off memory here, guys. So forgive my memory. Let's take this a little easier here. That might not work out for us, but that's okay. So, and I'm hopping out of the cab here just a little bit, so I'm not janking around the camera quite as much. I do like running from the cab, though. But I noticed that I have a tendency to kind of get a little jumpy, and so I apologize for that. We'll try and be a little bit more steady here with the camera work. But, so then I started getting interested in that. When I was in college, I actually did a couple papers on it. And then later on, when I started working for a railroad, and learned a lot more about operations and things like that. I don't know, I had to take a hiatus there for a few years after working for the railroad. It was just like, okay, I've had enough of trains. So, but then when I got back into the modeling aspect of it afterwards, I knew that eventually I was going to build a model of the Midland. And my last railroad I did, and that's where I kind of picked up a lot of these details and things like that, really got into a little bit of the history behind it, whatnot. And that's one of the things that modeling does. So if you're curious in your subject matter, you of course go and try and learn as much about it as you can, to try and get it as accurate as you can, if you care about such things, or if you're just curious about such things. And so the Midland was definitely mine. I think it was an interesting railroad experiment. Oh my God, that is hideous. I've got a big old chunk of, you see that over there? There's a big old chunk of roadbed sticking out of the canyon wall. I'm going to have to put a work order in for that. I try very hard to avoid those things. So, but sure enough, well, and that's why I can't see it, because I can't see it from the cab. So, we'll still go fix it. So, but if you're interested in your set, we got to do our cycle under here. Yep, everybody's coming with. We're almost there, folks. But yeah, if you're interested in your subject matter, you start learning a little bit more about it. So I'd encourage you, if you're going to do some modeling, or even if this game, if there's a railroad out there that you want to look into, dive into the history of it a little bit, because it's kind of interesting. So one of the runs that I want to do is the Rio Grande Southern, which was another railroad I really enjoyed exploring a little bit. And there's tons of that one that you can still explore out there. And the same thing's true with the Denver South Park and Pacific, which is also a really interesting railroad. I've never been a huge fan of the Rio Grande, but I understand and empathize with those of you who are, and obviously the guys who built this game are definitely into that one. And so there's a lot of interesting history behind that one as well. But it just, I don't know, it was still around when I was growing up, and so I just didn't find it you know, that terribly interesting. I like the abandoned ones, and it was not abandoned when I was younger. I remember seeing the black locomotives running around with the big Rio Grande Action Route stripes on them and stuff. So SD70s crawling their way up Tennessee Pass, and then, well, I used to see them all the time on the I-25 corridor as well. And so it wasn't quite that interesting to me, as much as it was the ones who was like, oh, this used to be a railroad. There used to be a railroad here. I always found that kind of interesting. So, but anyway, in we go to the coal mine here. We'll actually maintain a little bit of speed. Oh, we're going the wrong way, and I guess we're going to go that way because I can't grab the switch. Better safe than sorry. So that's okay. You almost saw me do something really stupid there and throw a switch underneath the locomotive. Superintendent would have definitely chewed me out for that one. But yeah, future versions of my railroads, online railroads, may include such different routes, but the Midland is my favorite, and so we might keep the logo the same. Just because I spent a lot of time studying this railroad and trying to find, you know, it was pretty hard before the days of the internet to find information. You literally had to go through dig through archives in either museums or libraries and stuff. And actually, there are quite a few archives on the Midland in the Penrose Main Library in Colorado Springs. If I'm not mistaken, that's where I got them. They might have been at the Tut Library too, which is in Colorado College. I can't remember exactly where I found, but there was one place that had an absolute treasure trove of stuff on the Midland. And but again, those were all pre-internet days, and so you actually had to go use the card catalog and stuff in order to find some of those things. Or microfilm. Oh my god, yeah, going through Colorado Springs newspapers from 1893 on microfilm. So the old versions of the Gazette. So, oh, those are, yeah, that was back before the internet. You can just click on all that stuff and find it real fast. But I like that because it makes, you know, actually, you know what? It's a good idea to run this train this way, because we can load up and then offload in the same order. Or without well, I guess we'll have to do one reserve move when we load up here, but not after we get enough coal in the mine. Let's go ahead and stop here before we run through that switch. I don't think I have any coal in the tipple. Oh, I have a little bit. Yeah, okay, we can do this. Alright, but we'll call it good for here. So that's a good 47 minutes. That's quite a hike. And so, well, anyway, I hope you enjoyed, I enjoyed talking with you. I hope you, I don't know, enjoyed walking with me down memory lane and my researches and or my research and travails and learning about the actual Midland, and maybe you learned something about it too. And I hope you learned something about poor train handling as well. So I guarantee you there's more of that in my future. But yeah, those will wait for videos down the road. We gotta get this train loaded up here. I'll do that all off camera, and then we'll catch you all here real soon for the trip down the hill. We'll see you then. Take care now.